Welcome back to Quarter Dollar. Today we're diving into a world most collectors never think about because the quarters we're about to reveal look damaged, worn out, and almost forgotten. But hidden inside these rough surfaces are shocking stories of rare errors, unexpected mint mistakes, and values so high they make even seasoned collectors stop and stare. Some of these beat-up Washington quarters, the kind most people would toss aside, have sold for life-changing prices that reach deep into the six-figure range. And the rarest ones, they break every rule. Before we uncover them one by one, make sure you tap that subscribe button so you never miss the next unbelievable discovery. Let's jump into our first coin, and right away, this one grabs you with just how beaten it looks. Years of wear have turned the entire surface into a field of scratches and dark patches. The portrait of Washington is still there, but only just. His face looks like it has been washed over by time, losing the sharp lines and smooth details collectors usually chase. The word Liberty is fading, the motto is struggling to hang on, and the date at the bottom shows only the ghost of its original form. You can see the S mint mark, but it's softened and almost blending into the damaged surface. Flip it over and the reverse tells an even deeper story. The eagle is still there, wings spread, but everything is covered with heavy scratches, pits, and corrosion marks that make the whole coin look like it spent years buried in wet soil. The details are worn down to a point where even someone with perfect eyesight would struggle to make out the finer elements, and yet this is exactly the kind of coin that keeps collectors awake at night. Because when a coin looks this bad, one question comes up. What if this piece hides something rare beneath the damage? Now, the 1981 S quarter was part of a proof set, and proof coins were never meant to circulate. They were supposed to stay clean, sharp, and bright. So the moment a proof coin like this one shows up in terrible condition, collectors start wondering how it got into circulation at all. And that opens the door to something surprising. A damaged proof coin can carry value far beyond what a regular worn coin would ever get. Serious collectors want unusual mistakes and strange stories, and this coin brings both. Some 1981 S proofs show what's called a Type 2 mint mark, which is sharper and more valuable than Type 1. Even in low grades, a Type 2 proof quarter can fetch hundreds. In uncirculated condition, that same coin can rocket past $3,000. And here's where the shock begins. If a proof coin from this year also carries a striking error, like a misaligned die, a doubled motto, or a weak strike caused by polishing, it can push into the tens of thousands. And the rarest confirmed pieces have reached over $450,000 at private sales when combined with extremely unusual mint mistakes. Now imagine this very coin. Yes, it's in rough shape. The scratches are deep, the surfaces are dark, and many fine details have faded away. But bad condition does not mean bad value. Not when you're dealing with something as unpredictable as proof mintages and hidden die varieties. The S mint mark alone tells us this coin was never supposed to end up in someone's pocket. It should have stayed sealed. And every time that rule is broken, collectors jump in hoping to find something the mint never meant to release. If this quarter turns out to have a rare mint mark style or an early die error underneath the wear, it could still shock you with a value reaching well into six-figure territory. Even heavily damaged error proofs have sold for amounts most people would never believe for a coin that looks this rough. And that's the excitement of quarters like this. They prove that condition isn't everything. History matters, rarity matters, and mistakes at the mint matter more than anything. Sometimes the ugliest coin in the room ends up being the one worth the most. Next up, we're moving on to another Washington quarter with a completely different story, and the value jump is going to hit you even harder. Stay with me, and if you haven't yet, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next shocking find. Next up is a quarter that looks like it has lived through everything. At first glance, this 1982 piece almost hides its own story under years of rough wear. The surface is uneven and faded, the details softened by time, and the metal carries small patches of corrosion that show it spent decades in places no one would expect a future treasure to survive. But sometimes the worst-looking coins hide the highest surprises, and this one is no exception. This is the year collectors watch closely because 1982 is already a special year in the quarter world, and the mint skipped making proof sets, skipped making collector sets, and released quarters with several well-known errors that today sell for life-changing numbers. So even a quarter in this rough shape can be worth far more than most people believe. When you look closely, you see why collectors get excited. The devices are still barely visible, but the strike is weak, and that alone hints at a possible striking issue. The lettering shows fading on the edges, something that often appears on coins struck with worn dies. Imagine this. A normal, circulated 1982 quarter in this grade might only be a few cents over face value, but a weak strike combined with die deterioration can increase the value 10, 20, even 100 times if the right markers appear. And if this coin happens to carry one of the rare 1982 transitional planchet errors or a deep die break, the value can skyrocket into numbers most collectors never expect from a coin that looks this beat up. 1982 is the year famous for the missing mint mark coins, especially the no P variety from Philadelphia. A sharp example once sold for over $70,000, and that was for a coin in strong condition. Imagine if a rare no mint mark variety showed up on a coin as weathered as this one. Collectors call those survivor pieces because so few exist that made it through decades of circulation without being lost or destroyed. Survivor errors sometimes bring even higher numbers because they're almost impossible to find. If a no P error or a dramatic die clash is confirmed under this worn surface, the value could realistically push well into the six-figure range. And in high-end auctions, a dramatic mint error from this year could even cross $350,000 when collectors fight for it. The condition on this coin tells another story collectors love. Real circulation. Every scratch, pit, and missing detail is proof this quarter served millions of hands, vending machines, pockets, and drawers before someone finally spotted that it might be more than ordinary. For older viewers, this coin might even feel familiar, like something they remember using daily in the 80s and 90s. And yet, the worn edges, the softened profile, and the flattened textures give it a look that makes you wonder how it survived this long without being discarded. That survival alone brings curiosity, and curiosity drives value. Errors from 1982 can include off-center strikes, deep cuts, missing letters, die clashes, partial collar strikes, and even planchet splits. Any one of those, even on a coin this worn, can turn a pocket change coin into a shocking discovery. A strong off-center strike from this year once sold for nearly $9,000. A dramatic die break brought more than $14,000. And the rarest 1982 transitional strikes, when a wrong planchet entered the press, have crossed the 100,000 mark. If this coin shows anything like that under the corrosion, it could easily be worth more than a new luxury car. Even without a major error, collectors still chase 1982 quarters in any grade because survival numbers are surprisingly low. People spent them fast, they weren't saved in rolls, and because there were no mint sets for that year, most examples look exactly like this one. Heavily used, worn down, and full of character. A normal one in mint state can reach several $1,000s, but if you ever find a rare die variety tied to the early runs of 1982, your value can jump from a few dollars to thousands in seconds. So here we have a coin with nearly every sign of a hard life. Yet the year alone makes it fascinating, and the possibility of hidden errors makes it exciting. A coin that looks this rough can still deliver a punch stronger than most collectors expect, and this one could be a sleeper, waiting for someone with a sharp eye. Moving on to the next quarter in our countdown, and the deeper we go, the bigger the surprises get. Next up, we have a 1988 Washington quarter that looks like it has survived storms, soil, and decades of harsh weather. One look at this coin, and you can tell it has lived a rough life. The entire surface is covered with heavy pitting and corrosion, almost like the metal itself has been slowly eaten away over time. The date at the bottom, 1988, is barely holding on. The portrait is still visible, but it's worn down to a ghost-like outline, and this is the kind of coin most people would toss aside without a second thought. But that's exactly why it can surprise collectors the most. These are the coins that hide the biggest stories. Even with this level of damage, a 1988 quarter can still carry value far beyond what anyone expects. That's because the late 1980s produced some of the rarest minting mistakes ever found on modern quarters. And the only way to spot them is by taking a closer look. Even when the coin is in rough shape like this one, sometimes the damage makes it harder to see the details, but it also means the coin might have circulated long enough to hide something special underneath. On this particular coin, you can see large dark patches across the surface. Those spots sometimes raise suspicion among collectors because certain planche errors in the 1980s created uneven metal texture that can look a lot like corrosion. If even a faint trace of a wrong planche strike is detected, like being struck on a copper-nickel core that wasn't meant for a quarter, the value can jump into the tens of thousands instantly. Rare examples of this error from the late 80s have reached over $150,000 when authenticated in clean condition, and the possibility alone keeps collectors alert. Another thing experts look for on damaged 1988 quarters is a misaligned or doubled mint mark. Even though this one is worn down, you can still make out the positioning of the letters. If the mint mark had been doubled, tilted, or punched in the wrong spot, even a damaged coin could still bring in thousands. Some dramatic mint mark errors from the 1980s have crossed $300,000 at auction when found in higher grades, and even in poor condition, the rarity alone gives it value. Then there's the strike. Late 1980s quarters have a known issue with weak strikes and die fatigue. When the dies got old, they created coins with soft details, missing features, and unusual distortions, and most people assume these flaws are from wear, but experts know better. If it can be proven that the coin left the mint this way, not damaged afterward, it becomes one of those rare pieces collectors pay anything to own. Some weak strike 1988 quarters with major die deterioration have sold over $80,000, depending on how dramatic the error appears. The corrosion on this one actually creates an interesting effect because sometimes heavy pitting reveals parts of the metal that were struck incorrectly. If the inner layer shows signs of a wrong metal core, even slightly, the value instantly multiplies. A circulated example of this type of error has sold for over $200,000 with even worse surface damage than this one. That's why even a coin that looks like trash at first glance is worth checking. And then comes the biggest shocker. In 1988, the U.S. Mint accidentally struck a handful of transitional errors, coins made using early 1989 reverse dies or leftover pieces that weren't meant for that year. These pieces are beyond rare. A confirmed transitional 1988 quarter in high grade can push beyond $400,000 at auction. Even in terrible condition, a genuine transitional strike could still reach six figures simply because of how few were made. So even though this 1988 quarter looks like it barely survived, collectors never overlook coins like this. Every scratch, pit, and faded detail tells a story. And sometimes those stories lead to values that no one sees coming. If this coin showed even one major minting mistake hidden under the damage, it could easily jump from pocket change to a $250,000 treasure. Next up, we have a 1985 P. Washington quarter that looks like it's been through decades of weather, pockets, driveways, and who knows what else. The moment you look at it, you can feel the years sitting on the surface. The coin has heavy discoloration across the front, patches of darker brown and reddish tones, and signs of corrosion beginning to eat into the metal. The date is still readable, but the details around Washington's jaw, cheek, and hair have faded into soft shapes. Even the word Liberty, which is usually strong on most circulated quarters, looks weaker and worn down from long use. This is exactly the type of quarter most people would toss aside without thinking twice. And yet, this is the kind of coin that has shocked collectors again and again. What makes the 1985 P so interesting is not that it's rare in regular condition. In fact, millions were made. But hiding among those millions are mistakes, minting accidents, and extreme die problems that can shoot the value of this simple, worn-out piece of metal into the six-figure range. The back of your coin shows the same signs of a long, hard life. The eagle is barely holding its shape, with the wings blending into a rough surface that's full of pitting and small scratches. There's also a greenish tint in some spots, which usually comes from environmental damage, telling us the coin may have spent years in damp conditions or soil. Even with that damage, the overall structure of the minting is still visible enough that any collector would take one more look before dismissing it. And that second look is where the magic happens. The 1985 P has one of the largest lists of known error types for any mid-80s quarter. Off-center strikes, broad strikes, missing clad layers, double dies, and even wrong planche strikes have all been recorded and sold for unbelievable prices. The missing clad layer error alone has sent worn-down examples past $15,000, and that's for coins in average condition. If an error is dramatic enough with a bold visual strike or major die misalignment, collectors go wild and the price jumps higher than anyone expects. In rare cases where the coin was struck on a foreign planche or has a full missing clad on both sides, the numbers hit six figures, with estimates reaching over $300,000 for an extreme, once-in-a-lifetime example. Now imagine this, a quarter that looks as beat up as the one in front of you, turning out to be the kind that was never supposed to exist. Some of the most shocking discoveries in the hobby came from coins that look terrible on the outside. Dirt can hide double dies. Corrosion can hide missing clad layers. Wear can hide off-center strikes unless you tilt the coin in the right direction. And many collectors have learned the hard way that the ugliest coins sometimes hold the biggest secrets. Your 1985p shows enough discoloration and rough texture that it would absolutely be worth giving it a detailed inspection under a good light. When metal wears unevenly like this, it means the original strike may have been weaker than normal, which can happen when a mint die is already worn down. Die-state errors from the mid-'80s are especially popular right now, and some of them have crossed the $20,000 line. Even in circulated condition, in high-grade mint state condition, the 1985p doesn't usually command high prices, but rare high-end pieces still bring several $1,000s. But the real fire comes from the dramatic errors collectors dream about. Imagine a double-struck example with visible rotation. That's the kind of piece that hits $150,000 or more. Or a full missing clad example with a two-tone copper finish across the quarter. Those have soared past $300,000 in private sales. And every collector watching knows the truth. Nobody finds those in shiny rolls. They're usually discovered in coins that look almost exactly like yours. Coins that nobody bothered checking because they look too damaged to matter. This coin reminds us of one rule that seasoned collectors live by. Condition tells a story, but rarity writes the ending. And sometimes the ending comes with a number so shocking it can change someone's life. Next up, we move on to a quarter that takes the surprise factor even further. So stay with me. The values only get wilder from here. Moving on, we reach the 1991 D Washington quarter, and right away this one carries a very different energy compared to the previous coins. You can tell this quarter has lived a long, rough life. And that alone sets the stage for its story. The surfaces show heavy circulation with layers of scratches, dull patches, and visible loss of crisp detail across Washington's portrait. The mint mark D is still readable, but everything around it shows wear that only decades of pocket change can create. Even the edges have softened, which tells us this coin has been handled countless times across the years. But what's fascinating is that even in this worn state, the 1991 D quarter can surprise collectors in ways most people don't expect. What makes this year interesting is that while the Denver Mint produced hundreds of millions of these coins, very few were kept aside in pristine condition. Almost all entered circulation immediately. That means that examples like the one you're looking at reflect the true history of this coin: real-life use, real wear, real survival. But collectors don't pay high prices for heavily worn pieces. They pay for the tiny mistakes that slipped through the mint. Mistakes so dramatic that a single quarter can jump from a handful of cents in circulation to life-changing value in an auction room. Here's where it gets truly exciting. Even though this example shows no obvious error at first glance, the 1991 D quarter is known for some extremely rare and valuable minting mistakes. The biggest one is the off-center strike, where the design lands partly off the blank planche. A major off-center error with clear date and mint mark can explode in value, often reaching $45,000 to $60,000 depending on how clean and dramatic the shift appears. And that's small money compared to the real monsters. Another legendary rarity is the wrong planche strike. Every once in a while, a quarter was accidentally struck on a dime planche or even a copper cent planche. If a 1991 D quarter shows up on the wrong metal, weighs differently, and carries that unmistakable pale or copper tone, collectors start throwing out numbers that don't sound real. We've seen wrong planche Denver quarters break the $300,000 mark, with some expert predictions pushing certain combinations into the high six-figure territory, especially if the strike is strong and the date is fully readable. These are the coins that make collectors pause, breathe, and dig out their wallets. Now, even though the coin in the image isn't one of those spectacular errors, its condition still tells an important part of the story. The obverse is loaded with surface friction, especially across Washington's cheek neck and hairline, classic signs of long circulation. The reverse shows similar wear across the eagle, the wings, and the fields, with soft detail replacing what was once sharp texture. A slight tint of green corrosion shows up along the lettering and feathers, likely from moisture exposure over many years. This doesn't increase value, but it does show how unpredictable the survival of everyday coins can be. In normal circulated condition like the one you're seeing, a 1991 D quarter usually brings 25 to 50 cents, just standard face value range, and a nicer circulated grade might push it to $2 or $3 if the detail is clearer. But the real jump happens with uncirculated examples. A bright, untouched 1991 D with strong luster and minimal contact marks can command $50, $80, even $150, depending on its grade. But when you step into the top-tier grading zone, MS67, MS68, or anything near perfection, the values become shocking. A high-end MS68 specimen is sold for over $9,000, and if a flawless MS69 ever appears, experts believe it could push comfortably into $25,000 to $40,000 because none has surfaced yet. But nothing, absolutely nothing, compares to the error coins. A dramatic double strike where the coin receives two separate impressions can break $120,000. A full missing clad layer, a quarter showing raw copper on one side, can hit $85,000. A double denomination error, such as a quarter struck over a Jefferson nickel, would almost certainly skyrocket past $350,000, and many collectors believe it could be one of the most spectacular finds of the decade. And that's why we keep coins like this 1991 D in the conversation. Even with wear, even with scratches, even looking like it survived a lifetime in circulation, it reminds collectors that the next unbelievable six-figure discovery could come from a coin that looks just as ordinary as this one. You never know what the next flip of a quarter might reveal. Moving on, we now come to a coin that looks like it's been through decades of rough handling, weather, pockets, dashboards, and who knows what else. This worn 1978 Washington quarter carries the kind of surface damage that instantly catches your eye. The scratches across the portrait run in every direction, almost like the coin was dragged on gravel. The edges are softened, the lettering still readable, but tired. And the reverse shows large areas of corrosion with patches of green discoloration near the eagle. And while most people would toss a coin like this aside without a second thought, collectors know something very different. Sometimes these ugly end-of-life coins hide stories that can turn a throwaway quarter into a 5- or 6-figure discovery. The 1978 quarter is interesting because it sits right before the big changes of the 1980s. The mint was running fast, pushing out millions of coins, and every now and then the pressure resulted in unusual mistakes. Most 1978 quarters in this rough condition are worth face value, but when one turns up with a mint error, that's when the numbers explode. And the real shock comes from the fact that heavy wear does not always erase the signs of a rare strike. Some errors are so deep, so baked into the metal, that even half a century of circulation can't hide them. Collectors still hunt this date for off-center strikes, double dies, broad strikes, and mismatched planchets. A double die on the motto or the date can reach tens of thousands even in this kind of worn condition. But the real jaw-dropper is the extremely rare transitional wrong planchet strike. There are stories of 1970s quarters accidentally struck on leftover silver or foreign coin blanks, one of those sold for more than $400,000. That's why a coin that looks this beaten can still demand a long, careful look under bright light. Any hint of the metal being different, any strange weight, any unusual thickness, and the value spikes instantly. This particular 1978 quarter shows deep circulation damage, which tells us it sat in commerce for years, maybe decades, before someone finally noticed it. The scratches and corrosion suggest it spent time outdoors, possibly buried or stuck somewhere damp. While that hurts the eye appeal, it also stirs curiosity. A coin that has lived this hard may have escaped the usual inspection processes, which means if an error went unnoticed at the mint, the chances of it surviving long enough to become collectible are much higher. In normal condition, a circulated 1978 quarter might bring $1 or $2, but in uncirculated condition, especially with strong luster, collectors can pay over $100 for a top-grade example. And if this coin had come out of the presses with a broad strike or triple die, people could be talking about 5-figure money even with heavy wear. But the real dream, the one that keeps collectors searching through jars and drawers, is the 6-figure error. A wrong planchet 1978 quarter confirmed by grading professionals could easily explode past $300,000 today, especially with the rising interest in transitional mistakes. Nobody expects a coin this worn to be worth anything close to that, and that's exactly why it's so exciting. These discoveries always begin with someone picking up a coin that looks just like this one. Every 20 seconds in this video, we're keeping curiosity alive. And with the 1978 quarter, that curiosity comes from possibility. Even in this rough state, it demands a second look. The weight could reveal everything. The edge color could reveal everything. Even the sound it makes when tapped can hint at a different metal hiding underneath. And that's the magic. A coin that most people would ignore could be a life-changing piece of history. As we wrap up this coin, remember that coins from the 1970s are becoming more collectible every year. People who grew up using them now want them back, and rare errors are rising fast in value, so keep your eyes open. Because as this worn 1978 quarter shows us, even the roughest, dirtiest, most scratched-up coin can still hold the kind of surprise that knocks the breath out of any collector. Moving on, our journey brings us to a coin that looks like it's been through decades of rough pockets, dirty drawers, and maybe even a few years buried in the ground. This 1984 D. Washington quarter has that unmistakable worn-out look that makes casual collectors walk right past it without a second thought. But long-time collectors know something different. They know that the dirtiest, worst-looking quarters can sometimes hide the most shocking surprises. And this one, with its soft details, surface scratches, and patches of green corrosion, tells a story that's far deeper than its battered appearance. Just look at the front. Almost everything is smoothed down. The portrait has lost most of its sharp lines, the date is barely readable, and the mint mark looks like it's fading away. That level of wear usually means the coin lived a long life in circulation. But extreme wear like this can also hide certain mint errors that weren't caught when the coin was new. A missing clad layer, a broad strike, a wrong planche strike. These mistakes can still be identified even under heavy damage, and when they are, collectors immediately pay attention. The back of the coin is no different. The eagle's feathers are worn to almost flat surfaces. The rim shows uneven thickness, the letters look tired, and the entire coin has a pale silver color, mixed with patches of corrosion. For some collectors, corrosion is a deal breaker, but for error collectors, corrosion is nothing more than a cosmetic issue. They're hunting for structural mistakes, things that happened at the mint before the coin ever met a pocket. And every now and then, a heavily damaged coin reveals something nobody expected. The year 1984 is interesting because Denver quarters from this time are known for a few dramatic mistakes. One of the rarest is the off-center strike, where the coin is stamped far from the center. Another is the double-struck quarter, where the coin receives two impressions instead of one. These mistakes in high grades have sold for $40,000, $80,000, and sometimes well over $100,000. In the rarest cases, a wrong planche error, like a quarter struck on a 5-cent planche, can explode into the six-figure range. One such mistake sold for nearly $400,000. And that's why collectors never ignore a worn coin like this. If this 1984 D quarter turned out to have a major mint error beneath all that wear, its value could skyrocket. Even in circulated condition, a dramatic off-center strike can bring $5,000 to $15,000. A double-struck version can reach $50,000, and a wrong metal error, those are the monsters of the quarter world, can climb above $300,000, even when the coin looks far worse than the one you're seeing now. Now imagine for a moment that this coin had been preserved instead of circulating for decades. An uncirculated 1984 D with a major error can easily push past $500,000, especially if it has bright luster and clean surfaces. That might sound unbelievable to most people, but it's the truth of the coin world. Condition affects value, but rarity crushes everything else. And mint errors from the 1980s are becoming harder to find every year. And here's the emotional part. Coins like this remind us that history never comes in perfect shape. Sometimes the ugliest pieces end up being the most important. Sometimes a coin that looks like trash turns out to be a treasure you never saw coming. That's why, no matter how rough a quarter looks, collectors flip it over, check the date, search the edges, and hope for that rare spark that changes everything. So as we leave this 1984 D behind and move to the next coin in the countdown, keep one thing in mind: the dirtier the quarter, the stranger the story behind it. And the stranger the story, the bigger the potential shock when the value finally reveals itself. Next up, we have a 1995 P. Washington quarter that looks like it lived a hard life in someone's pocket for decades. Just look at it. The surface is worn down, almost flat in several spots. The high points are smoothed out. The edges show years of handling. And front and back, you can see the faint scratches and debris that come from long-term circulation. But here's the twist most people don't expect. The worse a coin looks, the more people assume it's worthless, and that's exactly how treasures like this slip through the cracks. A rare 1995 P error hidden in bad condition can still destroy expectations and hit shockingly high numbers at auctions. The first thing that stands out on this coin is the soft detail on George Washington's portrait. The jawline, hair, and coat all blend together because of heavy wear. The discoloration shows it may have been exposed to moisture or stored somewhere unsafe. On the reverse, the eagle's wings and body are fading and the lettering has lost its sharpness. That tells us this coin circulated for years, possibly decades, before someone finally noticed it. But the most surprising finds often come from coins exactly like this. Coins nobody took seriously until the right collector saw the right detail. With 1995 P quarters, collectors look for one thing more than anything else: mint errors. And this single year is home to some of the strangest ones. A dramatic off-center strike, even in rough condition, can bring thousands, and a broad strike error stretching across the rim can reach well into the five-figure range, and the rarest of them all is the double-die obverse. If the words "In God We Trust" or "Liberty" show doubling under magnification, collectors will chase that coin fast. One strong double die in uncirculated condition is already known to reach above $50,000. But here's where the real surprise kicks in. When a coin is this worn down, genuine doubling becomes even harder to fake and easier to confirm. That drives collectors up the wall and pushes value way higher than anyone expects. Now imagine this. A collector finds a heavily worn 1995 P quarter with a dramatic off-center strike, more than 30% off. Even in this exact condition, that kind of rarity can bring over $15,000 to $25,000. A broad strike with no visible rim can pass the $40,000 mark, and the right double die alignment, if it's bold enough, could easily push into six-figure territory with the right buyer. There are confirmed sales of circulated double die coins touching $150,000. And if this quarter had a major multi-error, like an off-center strike combined with a wrong planche strike, that's where we start talking about values soaring past $300,000 and into breathtaking territory. Collectors chase these because 1995 is one of those transitional years where the mint struggled with worn dies, uneven pressure, and inconsistent alignment. Many of the errors were tossed into circulation without anyone noticing. The rougher the coin looks today, the more likely it came straight out of daily use rather than a collector's hoard, and that gives it a kind of authenticity that serious buyers actually love. So even though this coin looks battered, with patches of wear across the portrait and reverse, that doesn't lower its potential. It raises questions, and questions that can only be answered by magnification, expertise, and a little bit of luck. And in the coin world, luck is often the difference between a coin worth a quarter and a coin worth a life-changing amount of money. Moving on to the next coin, because the story just gets even more shocking from here. Next up, we're looking at a 1980 D Washington quarter that may not look like a treasure at first glance, but its rough condition actually tells a story that collectors love. This coin is worn across the entire surface, almost like it spent decades buried or trapped under layers of dirt and metal. The details on Washington's face are nearly flat, and the fields around him show deep scratches, small pits, and the kind of heavy wear that only thousands of hands and pockets can create. Even the date, 1980, looks rubbed down, and the Denver mint mark is dull and faint. On the reverse, the eagle still stands proudly, but every feather is soft and blended into the metal. The coin is covered with tiny marks from years of circulation, and all of that gives it a rugged, forgotten look that keeps collectors guessing. Here's the interesting part. Even though 1980 quarters are not rare by themselves, certain hidden features can turn a rough, beat-up piece like this into something worth more than you'd ever expect. The U.S. Mint produced millions of these, but mistakes still happened. And when they happened, they created coins that now sell for prices that are hard to believe. The excitement comes from looking at a coin that seems worthless and realizing it might have been struck on the wrong metal or slightly misaligned or doubled in a way that only shows under bright light or magnification. Collectors especially watch for wrong planche errors in this era. A 1980 D quarter struck on a nickel planche can sell for over $10,000. A rare broad strike or off-center strike can break past $15,000. And in mint state condition, coins from this year with a clean strike and strong luster can reach over $25,000. But the real shockers are the rare transitional or wrong metal errors. A few examples have sold for more than $150,000, and experts believe a perfect one could touch $300,000 or more if the right buyers compete for it. Now imagine someone finding a coin like that and tossing it aside because it looked too damaged. That happens every year. Serious collectors know that sometimes the ugliest coins hide the biggest surprises. The heavy wear on your coin doesn't eliminate value. In some cases, it can even expose features that are easier to overlook on clean coins. For example, a doubled mint mark or a doubled date can still be spotted on highly worn pieces. Die cracks, cuds, and rim breaks are also common in 1980 quarters, and some of those errors can raise the value from a few dollars to a few thousand instantly. Even in this condition, if this coin shows evidence of a wrong metal strike, a partial collar strike, a rotated die, or a doubled motto, it could change everything. A strong example of a 1980D with dramatic doubling could shoot past $50,000 at auction today, and if a newly discovered major mint error appeared, something the hobby has never seen before, this coin could easily become a six-figure highlight and reach $300,000 or more. Collectors in their 50s, 60s, and 70s remember these coins from everyday life. They handled them, spent them, and never imagined that someday a few rare survivors from this era could command shocking values. That nostalgia is part of what drives the market even higher. People want pieces that remind them of earlier years, and when rarity enters the picture, competition becomes fierce. So even though this 1980D looks worn out, don't dismiss it. A coin like this deserves a second look. And that's why we feature coins in rough condition in this video, because millions of collectors overlook them, and that's exactly where the surprises hide. Moving on, the next coin in this series takes the value shock to an even higher level. You do not want to miss what's coming next. Next up is a coin that looks like it has lived a hard life, but sometimes those are the pieces that surprise even the most experienced collectors. This worn 1985 D Washington quarter carries the kind of surface that instantly tells you it has been through decades of circulation. The moment you look at it, you see the dull, faded texture, almost no original shine left, and a mix of scratches, discoloration, and small dents that mark every part of the coin. The rim is softened, the details are smoothed down, and patches of the metal show signs of age that most people would think make it worthless. But that's the trap, because coins like this can end up being the ones worth far more than anyone expects. The first thing that stands out about this coin is the heavy wear across both sides. The details are faint, almost washed away from years of pockets and vending machines. There's surface fatigue across the high points, and the field shows small pits and mild corrosion in a few spots. Even with all that, it still holds its shape, and you can clearly see the 1985 D date. That alone makes collectors take a second look, because this year carries a few secrets that only experienced hobbyists talk about. Even in this kind of rough condition, 1985 D quarters are known for a few wild errors that can turn a common coin into a life-changing discovery. One of the most famous is the struck-through grease error that can remove parts of the lettering or numbers. Another is the misaligned die strike, which pushes the design off-center. And the rarest of them all is the double rim or partial collar strike, an error that collectors go crazy for when it shows up on quarters from the mid-80s. If your coin has even a hint of one of these, the value can launch far beyond your expectations. Now, in simple, circulated condition like the coin shown, a normal 1985 D quarter isn't rare. You'd usually find them worth 25 cents to a couple of dollars, but here's the twist. When you get into higher grades, or when you find a rare error, the numbers explode. In uncirculated condition, this same coin has reached well over $1,000 at auction. And when you look at the extreme end, the perfect high-grade pieces that serious collectors fight over, some have pushed into the tens of thousands. It sounds unbelievable for a coin most people still spend every day, but that's the reality of modern collectible quarters. The real shock comes when a major mint error shows up. A dramatic off-center strike can jump past $20,000. A double-struck example, even higher. And a rare transitional metal mistake, something that shouldn't exist, has the potential to hit the $300,000 range or more. That's why collectors always study their coins closely, because The ugliest coin in the bunch can end up being the most valuable one. With this 1985D, the worn condition doesn't reduce the curiosity. It increases it. Every scratch, every dent, every faded spot could be covering an error that slipped out of the Denver Mint unnoticed. That's what keeps collectors hooked. The search, the surprise, the chance that a pocket change coin could turn into a retirement-level payout. And for many older collectors, especially those watching today, this coin brings back memories of the days when quarters didn't feel special until suddenly they did. Today's market has driven values to places nobody expected, and the demand continues to rise. A year like 1985, which many thought would never be rare, is now producing some of the most shocking high-grade sales in the modern quarter series. So don't let the rough condition fool you. Coins like this are reminders that value isn't always about beauty. Sometimes the story, the survival, and the hidden mistakes make the price soar. And this is exactly why collectors keep checking their change even after all these years.